Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Emergency Home Learning Summit. Our guest today is Roger Schank. Roger, welcome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, really nice to have you participating in this way. What's your job? What do you do?
What do I do? I'm a revolutionary who's trying to overthrow the school system. It doesn't pay very well.
And how's that going?
Well, we have our little successes. So every now and then we get into a situation and we change things. We've been trying to overthrow a university system for a long time, and we are in a number of universities in their extension school where they let us do it right, and the kids love it. And the schools are starting to notice that the kids love it, and they're learning something, and they're getting jobs. I have this strange view that if you go to college, you should learn something and get a job from what you learn, but that's not most people's view. So, I've been trying to get the universities to change. That's hopeless. Trying to get the schools to change. That's hopeless. But people aren't all frustrated now. And so they sign up for our weird courses and love them and say how it changed their lives. Because our courses are trying to teach you how to do things and how to do things you want to do, not something we told you needed to do or you couldn't graduate. So it changes the perspective on things. And we're having a lot of little successes. I started doing this 20 years ago, thinking, and I had money from big industry. And I thought, well, I'll change the people who take training. They'll see what a good course looks like. And they'll say, why don't my kids learn like this? That never happened. They loved our courses and they never once tried to change education as a result of what had just happened. So I think it's kind of hopeless. And I think what's mostly hopeless is the parents. The parents, every time you go to any school system, and I've been to lots of them, the parents will always say, but how will they get into Harvard? You've never sent anybody to Harvard in the history of the school. Could we ask a better question? Well, how will they get into Oxford? and then all they sit around and worry about is, well, how will he get good grades on the tests and how will he pass the tests? Maybe the tests are stupid. Why don't you keep your kid away from the tests? Don't let him take the test. Oh, then something bad will happen. Probably, but if the parents united, they wouldn't be able to do this. And I think the power is in the parents. The parents don't know they have the power, and they don't want the power. When you say to them, let's not teach algebra, oh, but algebra is very important. And exactly why is that? Because it helps you think, and your evidence for this is what? I don't know. What's the quadratic formula? I never heard of it. Yeah, you memorized it, and you spit it back on every damn test, and it didn't do you any good. It didn't help you think. You don't even remember what the name of it. And I do this every lecture, first lecture I give, first words I say, how many people in the room know the quadratic equation? So imagine there's 1,000 people. 4 people will raise their hand, typically. And I'll point to them and say, okay, tell it to me. And they'll always tell me the Pythagorean theorem. And for me, it's like, yes, because this is all so important, this mathematics that you learned. What are we going to do? I was quoted in the Spanish newspapers as saying algebra is a religion. No one can defend it. But they all force it down the kids' throats. And it makes kids miserable. The alternative is funny too, because it didn't make me miserable. I love math. So I went into becoming a math major. What a waste of energy that was. I mean, it was an absolutely dumb decision. I wanted to be a computer science major, but they didn't exist back in those days. And so, the issue is that we have this stuff that we shove down people's throats and we don't even know why we're doing it. You want to hear a funny story?
Absolutely.
So one of my big successes these days is we have a cybersecurity program. The Defense Department paid for it because they were very worried that we don't have enough defenders and attackers. And at one point during that period after we built it, I happened to be looking at the curriculum for the Naval Academy because the guy in charge of my contract was also in charge of the Naval Academy. And so I looked and said, you could be an English major in the Naval Academy. You could be a math major in the Naval Academy. So he set up a meeting for me with the dean of the Naval Academy, who I knew hated me in 1 second because he was previously the chairman of computer science at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, which means he hates me, okay? Because that's how the academic world works. Why wasn't I at Yale? Anyway, so I get in there, you can feel the hate as soon as I get there. And I said, so why can you be an English major? He said, because English major, you learn how to think. Liberal arts teach you to think. And the Naval Academy is a liberal arts institution. I said, I thought you were training naval officers. Well, yes, but we teach them to think. I said, so I'm in a naval battle and Shakespeare's going to help me? What are you talking about? And he was just furious. He wanted to kill me. And there were some people in the background who were nodding at me, and later came up to me and said, he's not going to listen. We can't change this. Naval Art, U.S. Naval Academy is a liberal arts institution. It's the silliest thing I ever heard. But we're afraid to say, we will teach you to do X. And the problem on the other side, I think one of the big players in the problem in the school system is the academic world. And Harvard and Yale. Harvard and Yale look at Harvard. Harvard is my favorite one to make fun of because I used to be at Yale. But Harvard has, first off, Harvard, I don't know how many of you know this, the curriculum we have in the United States was written down literally by the president of Harvard in 1892. And what was he writing down? The curriculum, what they were teaching at Harvard. So here's some things they weren't teaching at Harvard: medicine, business, law. So they're not in the high school curriculum, because algebra is so much more important than any of those three. Because Harvard hadn't thought of it in 1892. We can never think about it ever. And you ask a kid about business, they want to go into business. Can we teach them that? No. You have to take World History 4. You have to take a foreign language, which you won't learn because you can't learn a language that way. We have to do all kinds of stupid stuff, and it never ends. And it isn't any one particular country, talking about language. So I lived in France for a while, and my daughter was, 14, and she went to the French high school, and she came back with a B in English. And I said, "You got a B in English?" I said, "Are there kids in your class who speak English?" She said, "No." I said, "There are kids in your class who got A's?" "Oh, yeah." I said, "How is that possible?" So, well, there was a ton of tests. They were asking me about the subjunctive case. I don't know anything about the subjunctive case. Right. But speaking English would be the goal, wouldn't it? That she knew how to do. And it happened the same thing. We came back there. I said, she got a B in French. Well, she was now fluent in French. And so we live in this world driven by testing, and the tests are stupider than you could possibly imagine. And all we want to do is make sure the kid does well on the test. And the kids are bored out of their mind because they don't care. So they sit around and try to memorize stuff they don't care about. And now I'm trying to create curricula that kids do care about by this weird thing of asking them what they care about. First kid I talked to wants to build the modding curriculum. I don't know what that word meant. He said, "Well, I like to see things and then think they're broken and I should fix them." I said, "What are you fixing?" He said, "Well, like my mouse doesn't work right and it's not designed right. So I'm redesigning the mouse now. The keyboard is wrong. So I'm designing." And it turns out there are all kinds of people on YouTube discussing these issues. So he's got compatriots to talk to, and what he wants to do is reasonable. And in fact, he's very bright, and he comes up with all kinds of interesting things about this modding curriculum, which we are now building for whatever kid wanted to do it. Well, the other side of the story is the kid is diagnosed with ADHD, is not going to go to, he's a high school senior, but he's not going to go to college because he won't get in. But he's very smart. He doesn't give a shit about all this crap. And there's so many kids like that. They don't want to do it. And why are we making them do it? Because we have a system where if you're not a college graduate, then you're looked down as an idiot. And if you went to Harvard, within 3 minutes of meeting anybody, you say, "I went to Harvard." And that makes you an official smart person. And we have our standards all wrong.
So Illich said that we were using schools as the model for all of our institutions, and that institutionalizing things turned them into the opposite of what they were supposed to do. Is this just a human nature thing, that schools are just like other institutions? There's a story of what the institution does, but then there's the truth of what it does?
Well, I think what goes on is in any institution gets started for reasonable purposes and tries to do the right thing, and eventually becomes incapable of change. And so if you go to any teacher in the school system and say, "What would you like to change?" They do have things they want to change, but no one's listening to them. And so what happens is they have to read. Why are we teaching Shakespeare? And one of my employees is married to a teacher who teaches Shakespeare. So I ask him why he teaches. "Oh, it teaches you to think." And what's the point? Well, there's only important life lessons in it. Why couldn't we teach those life lessons without having you learn it in Old English? I mean, who cares about Shakespeare? And I don't care if you like listening to a Shakespeare play, go listen to one. I don't have to be taught it. And right now there's a big fuss about teaching the history of slavery and Reconstruction, and because why? The real issue isn't that. The issue is, why do you feel uncomfortable around Black people? Which is most white people do. Why do they feel that way? Can we discuss it? Can we try and get this better? And everyone thinks they're better than being a racist. My daughter and I had a conversation the other day. And I said to her, she said about racism. I said, "You're a racist." What do you mean? I'm not a racist. I said, do you think Jews are smarter than other people? She said, well, of course. I said, that's racism. There's nobody who doesn't think they're better than you. And my people are better than your people. And came from a better culture than you came from. Why they think that, I don't know. But they'll fight like hell to preserve it. And so what we have is people fighting for a curriculum that makes no sense. And history is the best example. I happen to be in Canada at the moment. And I'm in Canada because I have a French-Canadian wife who was frightened to death of COVID in the United States, not irrationally. And so I'm usually here in the summer, but now I'm here later. And I can tell you something that's very funny about Canada, which is that if you meet anybody and discuss education, somewhere in the middle of the conversation, they'll tell you, you know, we won the War of 1812. And I find that pretty funny because I didn't know there were even a country in 1812, which they weren't. And if you ask an American, it happens I went to the Pentagon days after this. And I said, who won the War of 1812? And they said, I don't know, maybe the British? No one knows who won it. And then I was in the White House. And I said, so who won the War of 1812? And they're all going like that. And unfortunately, I had an effect on Mr. Trump, who apparently heard from the person I was talking to. And Trudeau came and visited shortly after. And he said, you think you won the War of 1812? Who cares? What does this matter? The Canadians are nuts about we won the War of 1812, and Canada was not a country until 1850 something or other. You mean the British troops were stationed in Canada? Okay, they were. Why not? They owned it. We teach history that makes ourselves feel good about ourselves. America's the best country in the world. Yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, I was taught that all the time as a kid. And I happen to be really anti-war. And we're the ones who invaded Vietnam and Iraq and all these things. That's so wonderful. I mean, what's so wonderful about that? In fact, since I'm in Canada, I was having a conversation with a bunch of Canadians last night. And they're still very proud of the fact that it's Veterans Day here. They're very proud of it, all wearing flowers. And they're all into these things. And I said, what do you think Veterans Day celebrates? Our veterans. I said, no, it's the anniversary of the armistice of 1918. This matters not at all. Well, we want our soldiers to feel proud. I said, all those people who went from World War I are dead. Well, we want all the other soldiers. We're proud of our soldiers. Why? You're proud of making people go to Iraq because we were making people go to Iraq, so you want to make your soldiers go to Iraq too, and that makes sense to you? No one even thinks about this stuff. We're proud of our soldiers. Why are you proud of our soldiers? What's to be proud of? Why do we have them? Well, we have an army. I said, yeah, you have an army for what purpose? To fight against the American invasion? Because nobody else is coming to Canada. You expecting an American invasion? You don't need an army. I'm just saying you can't have sensible conversations with people. They're caught up in what they learned in school. They learned in school, in every school system in the world, we're the best country in the world. We do better than you do. That's not a useful thing to teach. But that's, Nazis taught that, Soviets taught that, and so does every other country. Just don't teach it as loudly.
I'm going to go down a very weird path here, but if we're sort of cognitively wired and imperfect, and if we're large modern nation states with lots of communication, are there people who feel like the school system is the way that you kind of manage your society?
The school system is about indoctrination. That's its intent. When you see children pledge allegiance to the flag in the first grade, try to remember they don't know the words pledge or allegiance. And they've done a lot of studies of that. And it turns out the average kid thinks he's saying, I led the pigeons to the flag. Now, why are we standing up and making them recite a pledge allegiance to the flag every morning when they don't know what they're doing? Because it's the beginning of the indoctrination process. We will teach you how to think about everything. And we don't admit it. The school system does not admit that it's into indoctrination, and that's what it's doing. And also our curriculum is insane. We have a curriculum borrowed from the Romans, the liberal arts curriculum. It's the Romans thought that up. They were training orators in the forum. They were not training people who were in the regular population. They were training rich kids who hoped to be able to give speeches in the forum. And you couldn't do that unless you knew philosophy and history and mathematics. And yeah, okay, it's not Roman times anymore. Can we stop making more orators in the forum? Can we ask you what you want to do and let you do it? Is that possible?
So is the resistance to change just the inability to see past the story, or is it that we like the outcome?
I don't think we even understand the outcome. I think that the outcome to us is Oh, he graduated college. I'm so proud of him. Why? What do you think it takes to graduate college? Sit in a boring class for a long period of time, take notes, and tell the teacher what the teacher told you. This is nothing to be proud of. And 4 years of that, in fact, they could sit through it is amazing. As a retired college professor, I actually retired because I thought the system was corrupt. And as an actual college professor, since I would discuss that in class, the kids always agreed with me. And oh well, we got to get a college degree. Yeah, why? And then we have Obama was everyone has to go to college. Why? No one ever asked him why. And so the thing is that we all believe this silly stuff, and what we should believe is everyone needs to learn how to think hard. And I think there are only three things worth learning: human relations, reasoning, and that's what happens. You say stuff you've said a million times before. Communication. Okay. We need to learn how to communicate with people. We need to learn how to get along with people. And we need to learn how to think out a problem. So I've saying this for years. Obama quoted me on the campaign trail when he was running for president, and then did the exact opposite, forcing more testing, because he had an education secretary who he played basketball with who was into tests. If we can't get past the tests, right now we're being driven by this international PISA test. And the PISA test it's horrible. And you couldn't pass it, trust me. And we are judging countries. So I got to call an emergency call. You have to come down to Bogota, Colombia. Why? Because we came in 65th in the PISA. I said, it's not the World Cup. Who cares? But they care tremendously. And these PISA people, the OECD people, are evil. I've been on this, some people know I hate this guy, so they put me against the guy in charge. It was a fun conversation on the stage. A lot of people thought I wasn't being nice. Yeah, right. I'm sure I wasn't being nice. I mean, the issue is, why do you want to force every kid in the same mold? Now we're forcing every kid, every country in the same mold. So Singapore wins this quite often. Why? Because they're compliant people. They'll do what they're told. Not being a racist, I'm saying something that's true. They will memorize nonsense forever to get into college. We've ruined our world by tests. That's one of my peeves was Princeton, by trying to get into Princeton and the Educational Testing Service, which has got to be the most evil organization on the planet. Curiously, it did not start out that way. The whole SAT thing started out for a different purpose entirely, which is places like Yale would never let in Jews, for example. And so this is a way that Jews could get in by doing well on this test. I mean, the racism and anti-Semitism and so on in the system is deep and pervasive.
Roger, you're always so interesting. What percentage of students do you think graduate as high school students graduate as independent adults?
None. The whole thing is not making them independent adults. You could. You see, I run around and ask kids questions all the time. What do you want to be? What excites you? What do you like? And I did that with my own children. So here's an example, okay? My son you didn't have to ask him. I was at Yale. My parents lived in New York. We'd go visit them. And once he learned about the New York subway system, he couldn't get off it. And he begged me when he was 8, could I please ride by myself? And I said, okay. And I hid in the next car. And then when he was 10, I said, okay, this is why we moved to France. I said, okay, we're moving to France. I don't like how either your education is going. My daughter's education was all about what the other girls think of her and what clothing they wear and what kind of car their father drives. And I said, we're getting out of this place. And he wanted to learn about subways. You think they were going to teach her about subways? I said, okay. We get there the first day, I take him down to the metro and I say, here's how you read the map. Here's how you buy a ticket. Bye-bye. Do you know what he said back to me? Why have you been keeping this from me? Okay, so he goes off to school only so he can ride the subway there and back, and then spend the whole rest of the day starting more subways. And then after he learned the Paris subway system, he learned the Paris bus system. And I would take my kids with me on trips every now and then. So one time it was his turn, he was older, to go to Tokyo. He never got above ground. All he wanted to do was see the subway. Okay, so he goes to college. He goes to Columbia University. Why? Because they have a subway. And he calls me after a week and he says, I've decided to major in history. I said, get in the next plane and come home. What do you mean? He says, what should I major in? I said, subways. He said, how do you do that? I said, why don't you figure it out? Which he did. He's now the chief innovation officer of the Los Angeles transportation system. And his goal is still the same one he's always had, which is he wants to run the New York City subway system. It's all he's ever wanted to do. And all I ever said to him is, good, try it. Oh, pay attention to the nonsense. And you know, the kids tell you what they want. My daughter wanted to write. You could tell that was all she ever did was write. She was 4 years old. She was writing. So she's a writer. Okay, good. Let people be what they want. They will tell you if you listen. But I mean, I've been playing around lately with the idea that there are so many categories of kids, and all we have to do is establish what kind of kid you are, and we can create a curriculum that's just right for you. And I learned this by walking around. I was on a cruise ship, walking around the cruise ship and asking everybody, these are all retired people for the most part, what'd you like to do when you were a kid? Puzzles was the number one I heard. I was trained, why puzzles? I never liked puzzles. Guess what all the puzzle people were as professionals? They were all doctors. And you go, aha, of course, diagnosis is puzzle solving. And this is people who are fascinated by the puzzle. And I got all kinds of interesting answers like that. For example, when I got home, I needed to go to the dentist. I went to the dentist. I said, what'd you like to do when you were a kid? He said, well, I don't know. I standard things with boys and so on, like every boy does. I would take apart my bicycle every day, every year, and put it back together. Oil all the parts, put it back together. I said, does that sound remotely like dentistry to you? He said, yeah, maybe it is a little bit. And what I'm saying is that kids will tell you what they want to be. They don't know the words, but they'll tell you. But you have to listen and you have to ask. The system never asks. Nobody's an individual in the system. Everybody is the same as every other kid and has to take the same stupid subjects. Why can't I opt out and show you I'm working on this? You can help me work on it. Now, here we are in the modern era. The modern era has two pieces: the internet, which is not news, it's been around for a while. And second, this COVID stuff, which has caused everybody to not go to school, go to school. Look, school isn't particularly valuable in the first place, and the teacher isn't going to help you do much except I'll tell you what to learn and you'll memorize it and pass the test. What a teacher should be doing is helping you do what you want to do. So I want to run the subway system. I don't know how to do that myself. Now, my teacher probably doesn't know that either, but they could know it. It could be somewhere else. And so you have to ask these questions. So one day I had a meeting in my house. I invited a whole bunch of education radicals I knew. And I said, come to my house, let's discuss what we need. One of my friends in this regard is from Pakistan, so I paid for him to come in. I said to everybody, okay, just tell me what curriculum wherever you come from, needs. He said, we need a scientific reasoning curriculum. I said, why? He says, it's better than Islamic reasoning. Which I thought was sensible. And then I said, there was a guy there from Kansas that said, what do you need? He said, we need an aerospace engineering curriculum. You do? Why? He said, we build Learjets in Kansas. We have all kinds of manufacturing and not a single course in the entire state of Kansas that relates to aerospace engineering. Well, that's just crazy. What you could do is create an aerospace engineering curriculum for those kids who want it, and then put it online and let kids take it if they want, and have their teacher be wherever he happens to be, in Seattle, and let them build airplanes. After this meeting was over, I called Boeing and I said, will you help me design one? They said, sure. And so they gave me 12 experts for a day. I said, well, I'm going to give you a bunch of high school kids who are doing nothing but this. I don't think we should have taken 5 parallel courses. I think you should do one thing, dive in until you're through with it. I said, so you can have these kids for a year. They're 16 years old. They know nothing. They said, okay. I said, what would they be able to do after a year? He said, they could design a 787 after a year back. Really? Okay. Last project, design 787. What's the first project? Design a table? Okay. Design a boat? Design a biplane? It was a great curriculum. Boeing wasn't going to pay for it, of course. But Boeing had also brought in what they needed to do to sabotage it, not intentionally. They brought in a professor from the University of Washington who was in aerospace engineering. And the first thing he said was, this is all there is to know about professors. Well, I hope there'll be lots of math and science in this curriculum because kids show up at the University of Washington without knowing enough math and science. Now, you want the translation of that from a professor who knows what he was saying? He's saying, I don't have to teach them math and science. They should know it before they show up. They're not going to teach things I want to teach. So you want every kid in the whole world to learn math and science just in case they show up in your curriculum. I said, well, this is what I'll do for you. We'll go through our curriculum, we'll build it, and we'll see if we can find put math and science in it if it's relevant. And afterwards, I'll come back to you. At the end, we had not put any math and science in it, amazingly. Nowhere did it fit. So I said, how about design a table? Do you need math and science? He said, well, of course, you need Newton's laws. So I had a Greek shipping expert on my team. He raised his hand. He said, so before Newton, there were no tables? Which is, of course, the only relevant question. But well, you need physics. No, you don't, okay? This idea that you have to memorize F equals ma, for what purpose? We are constantly coming up with things that people must know. And we have to get over the idea of knowing as being important. It's doing that's important. Knowing doesn't matter. And so we have this problem in every country in the world because teaching is about teaching people to know things. You know, it doesn't last when you teach somebody to know something. They forget it.
Roger, we're really comfortable with food in the food part of our lives, with variety, entrepreneurship, people doing very different things in very different ways, making different choices. Why is food such a richly diverse part of our culture, but education seems so monotone?
I disagree with you about the food. Okay, I happen to be a food nut, right? And I eat whatever weird thing you could possibly imagine. I have in my family a set of people who are the weird people who want to do the weird stuff, and a set of people who want to do the normal stuff. So my son, I want to design my own subway system when he was 8, is weird. And my daughter, I want to be right all the time, is not weird. I take my son with me when I go to restaurants, not my daughter. She won't eat any of these things. My son will eat any weird thing I happen to be eating right now. And he has a son who has exactly the same point of view. He's also very weird. The idea that food is about experimenting and trying new stuff is not what most people think about food. Most people get very upset when you want to serve them, raw octopus. Me, I'm looking forward to it. But, it's like whatever I happen to be eating at this moment. And for example, my wife, who's a Canadian, went geese hunting the other day and came home with 10 dead geese. And I love food and I would love to eat the geese, but I watched, she murdered them and then she butchered them. And I thought, oh my God, I watched this. And then she ripped the breasts out, serve us goose breast. I said, actually, the best part of a goose is goose liver. She says, no, that's disgusting. I'm not going to go rip that out. Everyone draws their own lines. As for me, I think goose liver is much better than goose breast. People don't want it. It's all about trying new things.
I think what I meant was I could go to a city and there can be a huge variety of food available because it's a fairly entrepreneurial culture. Now, there's still standard grocery stores, standard chain restaurants, but I can also find a Thai restaurant or a Vietnamese restaurant somewhere. But it feels like we don't think in the same way in education. It needs to be standardized.
Because the government's in charge. The government's not in charge of restaurants. The government is the evil player in this, and in every country it is. And it exists to support the existing system, because I don't want to teach kids that we could change things. I want to teach kids that whatever you have is right. So I'm not going to, restaurants don't affect the government in any way. When people eat weird food, the government, they're not going to vote differently. But if they actually have new ideas, they might vote differently. So we don't want kids with ideas. We actively prevent it.
Roger, if you could give any advice to parents and students right now who find themselves sort of with their lives a little bit scrambled, they're doing home learning, they feel a little bit lost out of the system, what advice would you give?
I would recommend the following. The word online learning has changed meaning 16 times in the last year. It now means you're on a Zoom call listening to your teacher blabber on again. And the kids on these Zoom calls, which include my grandchildren, are miserable and bored with it. So I say to them, so don't be there. Or stare at it while you're doing something else. They're just being, are you doing something else? Their parents are saying, you must do well. I'm saying to my grandchildren, ignore your parents. Do what interests you. And here's the issue. Online education is the savior. I've been working on this for 30 years for a reason. It's how you fix the system. So we can't talk about the schools, which are always based on you had the teacher can only teach what they knew. And if you're living in a place that only has one teacher, good luck with making some change. But we don't have that now. We have every teacher in the world available to every kid. What we have is such a confused view of courses that we don't know what to do. So my example of this, of course, is MOOCs. Oh, that's going to save the world. Online education will be online lectures. Those lectures are such a good way of learning. Lecture in Roman, it means Latin means to read. Somebody was reading at you. And why they were reading at you? Because you didn't have a book. We now have books. You don't need anyone reading at it. So they're still doing it in school. You still go to universities and there are lectures everywhere. And lectures are a waste of time. I was once yelling this at Northwestern when I was there. And some professor came up and said, well, I give great lectures. I said, okay, here's the test. You walk into your classroom, there's one kid in the class. Do you give the lecture? He says, well, no, but he missed a great lecture. So this art form of blabbering at people, which I'm good at too, I just don't like doing it because I think it's wrong. But the idea that you're going to blabber at someone, they're going to learn, it's just not true. They might find something interesting, they might laugh, they might find something key to think about. But lecturing is a waste of time. So that wasn't going to change anything. This MOOC idea is insanely stupid, and we have to. It's finally fading away, but there's still a lot of people doing that. So we've ruined people's concept of online education. It's MOOCs or online Zoom meetings. Now can we realize online is the solution? We have to learn by doing courses, which could include what I call deep dives. I'm staring at a body of water. I want to teach you to swim. Throw you in and see if you survive. I'll be there to save you and throw you in again. And we have to keep throwing people in so they learn the skills, whatever skills they want to learn, by diving in, and they need help. That's why my company is called Socratic Arts. You need a Socratic mentor. Someone will say, well, what do you think happened there? Why do you think went wrong? What do you think you could do about it? And we can do that. We can do that, not in subject is the wrong word. In any field where the kid wants to do something, we can find a mentor for him online to help, and design a curriculum that's all learned by doing to help him do it. And our cybersecurity curriculum has worked out very well because who goes into cybersecurity? You wouldn't necessarily know. The weirdos, the people who are the bad kids. They turn out, when I interviewed the first bunch of people that the Defense Department brought me, they all had been thieves as kids, like to break into shit. And I didn't know how we were going to find somebody, so I called all my people and I said, I need some to learn how to mentor this. I said, which of you like to break into things? One woman raised her hand and said, me, I like to. She's now our mentor. And her daughter's our mentor because this is genetic. And these are, it's a weird field, but it's good for people, typically kids who are being diagnosed as being the bad kid or having some disease or whatever. They all have ADHD, whatever that means. And the issue is, how can you get something that's so intense it causes you to focus and think hard? Well, first off, you have to care. So ask them, they'll tell you. Kids are happy to tell you what they care about. You don't have to be 15. They can tell you at 4 if you actually are listening to them. And you can find out, I don't know, I never heard of modding anything before. And now I asked this kid, who was a kid of one of my people, what do you like doing? And he says, I like modding. I don't know what modding is. But if you like modding, let's help you mod. Why? Because he's having fun and he likes it. And in the end, it's causing him to think hard about things. And it may lead to a career. I don't know. It doesn't have to. It has to lead to, I'm excited. That's what it has to lead to. And no one wants kids to be excited in school. They want kids to be shut up, sit down and shut up. That's what they want.